What if the spiritual gifts that you've been struggling to identify or claim aren't yours alone? What if the fear that you feel in the pit of your stomach that grips your voice, the doubt that clouds your sense of purpose, the grief that you just can't explain, didn't start with you? Your blood carries more than biology. It carries memory. And within your lineage lie both the distortions that dim your light and the codes that can set you free. This is Ancestral Alchemy. And if you are a healer, practitioner, intuitive, light worker, here to serve in these pivotal times, this is not optional. This is the work. So in today's episode, we're going to go deep on why ancestral healing is imperative for healers, in my humble opinion, and how our DNA and mitochondrial inheritance shape our gifts, what trauma, grief, and suppression live inside of our lines, and how you can begin to restory this sacred order and the original blueprint within yourself and your lineage. So this is about energetic sovereignty. This is about remembering who you are, but also who walks with you. Hello, I'm Venessa Rodriguez, founder of Wildly Rooted and the Future World podcast. I'm an Akashic channel, a clinically trained practitioner, and intuitive guide to healers, mystics, and visionaries walking the edge of change. And for over a decade, I have walked between the clinical and the mystical, bridging science and soul through nutrition, herbalism, energetic technologies like the Akashic records, astrology, and ancestral healing. And let me tell you, what I'm talking about today is something that is deep within my own heart, because chronic illness, the loss of my mother, and deep ancestral grief initiated me into this path of healing and my service work. And what began as a personal healing turned into sacred devotion to support others in reclaiming their gifts, their lineage, and their soul's voice. And I'm guessing that you probably have a similar story, why you are even wanting to be of service to the world in the first place. In today's episode, I am sharing why ancestral healing is not optional for healers and how healing your lineage is part of the key to unlocking your spiritual gifts. So you'll learn how to work with your ancestral line biologically, energetically, and spiritually. And I promise I will give you some practices to begin to do that today. So you will walk away understanding how to identify the blocks in your bloodline, how to start ancestral connection ritual, and why we must answer this call now, especially as the veil's thin in this season of remembrance. So why ancestral healing and why now? I've been sitting with this a lot lately, the necessity of healing transgenerational patterns, especially for those of us who identify as healers, light workers, practitioners, guides, visionaries. When you are here to be in service to others, what that means is that you also are here to take radical responsibility for what you carry within your own lineage. Whether it's gifts or trauma, we cannot serve sustainably if we bypass what we are carrying. You came in with a blueprint, with a divine design, if you will, and for some of us with a sense of mission or purpose. And all of that is encoded within your ancestral memory, your DNA, your mitochondria, your biofield. So much of the dis-ease, the confusion, the burnout, and kind of that static feeling that we have, it's not just ours. It's the unprocessed grief of generations. It's the trauma that has not been healed over lifetimes. And if we don't know how to tend to that, we unconsciously perpetuate the distortions. What's unresolved in our lineage doesn't disappear, it just doesn't go away. It becomes that static in our instrument, in our channel. And our soul's song can't come through clearly until we tune the strings. And often those are the strings of our ancestral lines. And the time is now, because Well, first of all, we're in the portal season. The veils are thinning. We're in this potent moment, this season that historically and energetically across cultures is aligned with ancestral connection, whether it's Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, we see All Souls Day. The call to restore the lineages we come from is louder than ever. And healers are really being called to restore what we would call sacred order, cosmic order, to become ancestral alchemists. So I want to start first with the DNA and the Motherline. Let's get cellular for just a moment. Now, as a health practitioner, I've worked with the mitochondria for years. It's not just the powerhouse of our cells, it's a spiritual archive. And did you know that your mitochondria carries light codes, literally, and the mother codes passed exclusively through the maternal line, which means you are carrying the energetic signature, the biological legacy, and the unresolved wounding of every woman who came before you. And that's not all. The mitochondria doesn't just make energy, it speaks to light. They communicate with the solar light in particular, which feeds cellular alchemy. This is how we create energy within our bodies and fields. So our relationship to light is ancestral, it's biological, and it's deeply spiritual. When we look at the body, there is a huge density of mitochondria located in the heart. And it's our cellular connection to the sun, to life force, and ancestral memory. We can trace this through what's called haplogroups. You can find out your specific haplotype and haplogroup of your mitochondria. And yes, this requires a mitochondrial DNA test. And I understand the reservation around doing that and giving out your DNA. Although, to be honest, I believe that our DNA information is already there and available. And even without our volunteer and consent, it's out there. But if you do want to get a deeper understanding at that level, it does require taking a mitochondrial DNA test, which you can find more about online. I'm not going to recommend any particular company or sponsor anything like that. However, what that will do is it will provide you insight into your specific haplotype, haplogroup, and trace that lineage throughout thousands of years and around the globe so that you can see, theoretically, the origins of your maternal line. And you can also gain a deeper understanding around how your mitochondria specifically works with the light codes, because different haplogroups have a different relationship with light and how they work with it to produce energy. So they all originate essentially in the Africa region, according to this model and what is being measured. But there are genetic shifts that occur through transmigration. One way of eating and living in the far north, where there isn't a lot of heat or light, is going to be very different than somebody whose maybe original haplogroup is from closer to the equator. But beyond physical DNA, we carry the mother codes, literally our mother codes, through the mitochondria, in addition to our biofield and Lightbody. So the mitochondria is connected in with our Lightbody. If we can imagine, and I know many of you already know this, that we have many more bodies and levels of our being beyond just the physical. And so we have our biofield where information is stored, and it's stored through light and codes, frequencies. It's an information field which informs our DNA and informs our physical manifestation and experience. So this is why working with the motherline, the matrilineal codes, and the energy of the mitochondria is one of the most powerful access points for ancestral healing. And yes, we can work with mitochondrial DNA, haplogroups, and science, but we can also feel into it because it's you. It lives in your heart, in every cell of your body, in your dreams, in your intuitive knowing. So you don't necessarily need a mitochondrial DNA test to gather more information. You can if you'd like, but it's not necessary because you already hold that information. Our field stores information beyond what is measurable. So our DNA is not the full story, and we don't even know the full story of our nuclear mitochondrial DNA. There's so much more to that we cannot measure with the tools that we have available currently. But we're also carrying information in our biofields, our energetic fields, and our soul template. These fields store memory. So literally, certain memories that we think are stored in the brain are actually stored in these fields, and our brain has the task of finding those and pulling them in as part of our cognitive experience. So these fields store memory, but they also store trauma. They store our gifts. They store that original coding and blueprint, our design. So even if something on a physical level gets distorted, it can be restored to its original template. What's important is understanding that the distortions that we have experienced through, again, transgenerational experiences of trauma and wounds and all that stuff, these can be rewritten, restoried. So you are not trapped by the behaviors and beliefs and acts of your lineage. You are the healer of it. And because time is not actually linear, it's spiralic, so there are multiple times happening at the same time. It's beyond what our brain has the capacity to perceive, because our brain, part of the function of our brain is to experience linear time. This is what I mean by ancestral alchemy. When you do the work of restoring coherence, removing static so your soul song can come through clearly, you are simultaneously healing your ancestral line. And I see this time and time again. When we do this work, we don't just feel better, we remember who we are, and our gifts come online. We are amplified in our abilities and what we are actually meant to do and be. I've seen in my Akashic readings and in natal charts and in my own experience of my lineage healing, so much of what we're working on in this lifetime was actually encoded in the stars when we arrived, because the stars are essentially, we could say, part of the programming through electromagnetism. And the natal chart, therefore, is like a divine fingerprint. In Hellenistic astrology, there are certain things that we can look at to get some clues and understandings and information about our ancestry and our ancestral line and baggage, so to speak. So I'll share some of the things that we can look at that you can tune into within your own chart. Now, with Hellenistic astrology, it does use whole sign house system. So when you bring up your natal chart, you want to make sure you have your exact time of birth, which is very important to get the accurate ascendant. But you also want to look in whole sign house system. Now, when we're looking through the lens of Hellenistic astrology, we can look at the fourth house, which is connected to the roots, ancestral lineage, inheritance, your private life, and memory of the family. This is also in connection with the father, the house of the father. So very often we see the paternal lineage here as well, although in general, I tend to see like both sides coming through with the fourth house. The 10th house is connected with the maternal legacy, as well as legacy and career in general, and how we are seen in the world. So there may be some indications there in the 10th house that you could look at. The moon, one of our primary luminaries, is traditionally connected with the maternal line, the mother, as well as your emotions and foundation. And the sun is connected traditionally with the father. Now, we may see certain malefic influences with certain planets like Saturn or Mars that are afflicting planets in these houses. So we want to look at the condition of certain planets, the condition of like the geometry, the aspects between planets. What is the story that is playing out in relation specifically to those items that I had just mentioned? So let's talk asteroids and ancestral alchemy for just a moment. In my personal chart, I've been tracking key asteroids that sit directly on or near my IC, the Imam Chole, which is the most private-rooted ancestral point in the chart. So you can look at this point for yourself as well. The IC speaks to our foundation, our lineage, our hidden inheritances. This is what we carry from the deepest strata of our being. It's the hidden underground aspect of things, the unseen beyond the veil. Now, when asteroids conjunct the IC, they often point to ancient gifts and spiritual intelligences that we are born with, lineages of thoughts, practices, or soul affinity, as well as patterns or vulnerabilities that are really asking for our attention and healing. And if we're just moving through life in an unconscious way, these patterns will live their way out through our lives. That story will play out in an unconscious way. That's why it's so important to get really aware of what these patterns are. So let me walk you through some of mine. Conjunct my IC, I have Albertus Magnus, which this one is wild to me because I actually began studying this guy years ago. He was fascinating to me, and you will see that there are certain asteroids that are prominent in your chart, have prominent placements in your chart that you were already connected to or have an affinity for. Like, for example, I see a lot of that with my clients with specific goddesses that they're really into. Now, this is the lineage of the philosopher, mystic, and sacred scholar. Albert Magnus was a doctor of the church. He was mentor to Thomas Aquinas. He was a philosopher and alchemist and bridged the worlds of science, spirit, and sacred knowledge. He wrote extensively on natural philosophy, on theology, and astrology, seeing the stars not as superstition or something that is evil, but rather as divine language expressing God's will in form. Hello. So he held the view that astrology could actually help us live more ethically, more in alignment with natural cosmic law. And he understood it as a way to remember the divine order and our place within it. To have this asteroid conjunct my IC and to discover that after I had already been like researching this person, right? And having kind of a fascination for him, points to this ancestral resonance with esoteric scholarship, ethical inquiry, astrology, of course, within that greater body of work, mysticism, and also service work through divine connection. He was very devout as a Christian, and Christ, the Christos, is something that is also very important to me and I have a connection with. My pull toward theological inquiry and energetic cosmology and then grounded spiritual practice may be more than just an interest. It's in my lineage. So that is something that was literally within me that wanted to come through from my IC. There's also just a side note, speaking of mother codes, there's a connection to devotional service to the divine feminine here. Albertus Magnus was visited by the Virgin Mary, which changed his life path. And he turned away from the riches of his family into deeper spiritual surrender and commitment and a life of service. So that is something that I feel is really coming alive for me, especially around the mother. Obviously, like so much of that is coming through in the most recent podcasts and in my work. But to see it in my lineage is just mind-blowing, right? In connection with the IC. Two last ones that I'll mention. I mean, this is just a snapshot of what you can see through your natal chart, right? I have one asteroid called Santiago that is conjunct my IC. This one brought tears to my eyes when I connected to that because Santiago is my paternal grandmother's maiden name. And her lineage, the very first well ancestor who came through to guide me during my early work in ancestral healing and the ancestral realms, came from her line, from that direct lineage. So to have Santiago placed exactly on my IC feels like a direct calling card from that lineage and like a celestial wink and confirmation that that is where it began for me. That line holds wisdom, healing, memory for me, and that I am here to do the work for that particular bloodline. This is a reminder that sometimes our ancestors speak through the stars. Now, I mentioned the gifts and the familial connection, but I also want to mention the patterns and the trauma that can come through. And there are quite a few. I'm not going to get into all of it because I don't want this to be a podcast episode based on my IC conjunctions, the asteroids. But the last one I want to touch on is the asteroid Bacchus. Now, this speaks to the lineage of indulgence, addiction, and escapism. Bacchus, if you're not aware, is the god of wine, excess, and ecstasy. So how does this show up in my own lineage? Well, on both sides of my family, but I would say especially through my paternal lineage, it shows up through generations of partying, addiction, and avoidance, escapism, especially through alcohol. I have seen and felt these patterns intimately in my own life, in my own family members. Lots of trauma, lots of grief with that, and devastation on both sides of my family that I see with those patterns of addiction. And that is something that brought to my awareness through my lived experience, I knew in my heart to stay away from. But this is also a reminder, if it's something for someone to see in their lineage that there is this pattern, it doesn't mean that you have to succumb to it. So Bacchus here points to this kind of karmic thread that I, as well as my other siblings and other family members, are here to transmute. So it's not by denying pleasure. Pleasure is beautiful and our birthright, but by creating a new blueprint for embodied joy and ecstasy through healthy means, not through escapism. It's not about numbing out through substances and having that take over your life through addiction, but rather being able to commune and access those non-ordinary altered states of consciousness through ceremony, through breath, through light, through divine connection and your presence. So for me, this was particularly important to find because it was not only a clear invitation, continuous invitation for me to watch for those indulgences, but also to acknowledge my own knowingness around it already, and that I am here to alchemize that rather than repeat the pattern. So together, these asteroids really tell a powerful story, and I didn't even share all of those with you. I come from a line of explorers, stargazers, curious scholars, and philosophers. I carry within me connection to esoteric wisdom, energetic cosmology, and I am here to heal patterns of excess, dissociation, addiction, and inherited grief. There is more with my IC that I am here to heal as well that I'm not going to share in this episode. But I am also supported by well ancestors who guide and walk with me, whose names are not only written on my heart, but they're written in the stars. This is available to you as well. This is part of the ancestral alchemy work that we can do. Now, when we attune to these signs, we begin to see the patterns more clearly, right? We begin to see what we came here to alchemize. Now we're going to get meta here. You may even have been your own ancestor. Now, I've seen this over and over when I've accessed the Akashic records of others. When we tap into their lineage, it's not just about blood lineage, it's about soul family and soul lineage and your own lives. And I have seen that people will maintain and stay in their own life and ancestral lineage over lifetimes. So you may have been your own ancestor, which is kind of wild and mind-blowing to think about. But we are traveling with our soul families, working through bloodline and soul line contracts and healing both. One pattern that I do see through my work with healers in particular, that I see over and over, especially with women, is the persecution wound, the witch wound. Now, this is experienced through the ancestral line, through the morphogenic field, which we have a field, a morphogenic field where we have a collective memory field, and the psychic memory through inheritance of being silenced, of being punished, burned for your gifts, literally attacked, denigrated, and destroyed for your healing gifts. This is unfortunately encoded in the collective, and healing this wound is essential if we want to bring our full medicine to the world, because a lot of common patterns that we see are hiding. And that fear that holds us back through that witch wound, the persecution, the silence, the overgiving. We also have grief without source. And that's something that I see pervasive as well. It may not even be directly from a persecution wound or witch wound, but through other trauma that we don't know where this grief is coming from. And of course, we have our collective grief that we are collectively processing, especially now. And this can come through as like a deep sense of sadness or emptiness, a chronic self-doubt, disconnection from yourself, your truth, and your divine feminine coding. Feeling spiritually alone, even when we're doing the work. So, where does healing begin with that? It begins with awareness and connection. You don't need to know every ancestor's name. You can start with a feeling, the repeating patterns, the stories passed down through your lineage. You are the point of transformation. You're the fulcrum. Your healing, the work that you're doing in your life, sends ripples both forward and backward in time, as time is not linear, it's spiralic. So the work that you are doing within your own life is healing your ancestral lineage and the lineage that comes after you. And this is not about blame, right? So when we're doing ancestral work, it can sometimes be a part of our journey to look at what others did, especially when there are, there's violence and trauma and atrocities, and to place blame. And of course, there is anger, and that is something that we definitely have to feel through. But this is not about blaming. This is about restoration. This is returning sacred reciprocity to your line, to your lineage, and reclaiming what is true, what was always there, and what is yours to experience and bring forward as medicine to the world. And we are in a moment where the old ways are collapsing. The world needs you. It needs your radiant, sovereign, courageous self. And ancestral alchemy is one of the paths to that expression. Okay, so how to start ancestral alchemy and working with the well ancestors? Well, not all ancestors are well, but when we consciously connect with healed, whole, well ancestors, someone beyond the wound, we can receive guidance, support, and medicine. And this is what we're going to be doing together in our upcoming live ceremony called Between the Veils, Ancestral Alchemy for the Healer's Path. This is available to members of my monthly membership and community for healers called Bloom. And it's happening on October 30th when the veil is getting super thin. You will receive a live activation and ceremony, Akashic transmission channeled, and a safe container and guidance to meet your well ancestor. And then we'll also have an open Akashic Q&A for integration. If that sounds like something that you would like to be a part of, come join us inside of Bloom before October 20th when our doors close. You can click the link in the show notes or go to wildlyrooted.com/Bloom. And you will not only get access to our community and all of the content, as well as the amazing intuitive healers that are already inside of Bloom, but you will also get access to this ceremony and activation happening live on the 30th, and then the replay for that for as long as you're inside of our container. You can join us again before the doors close. I want to leave you with some ways and starting points to begin working with your ancestral line and doing ancestral alchemy work. So first is you can choose to work with a well ancestor. So if you cannot join us or do not want to join us inside of our workshop, you could still do this on your own. Now, again, you're not calling in just any ancestor. You're calling in the healed ones, right? The ones that are the well ancestors that carry the medicine, the love, and the wisdom. And one of my favorite teachers and books on this is Ancestral Medicine by Dr. Daniel Four. If you're not familiar with him, he gives wonderful instruction, very clear protocol, and it's very simple yet direct and easy to follow. So if you wanted just to pick something up like this and do it at your own pace, I highly recommend that you check that out. The thing that you want to make sure that you're doing, though, is that you are clearing your field, anchoring into your heart, and then establishing protection. So the heart is the portal. That's where we want to move from and move through. The field is the temple. So we want to make sure that that is clear and that we are grounded. And then intention is incredibly important. So those are the things that you want to keep in mind when you're putting together your own activation or ceremony around this. One thing that I have found is using sound is really potent for connecting with our ancestors because sound travels, right? It's frequency. You can use sound, song, and story to connect with your ancestors. One example is you can do journey work, meditate or drum your way into the heart and connect with the intention of meeting a well ancestor. And drumming, listening to drum beats or drumming yourself is an ancient way of getting into a non-ordinary state of consciousness, if you want to call it that, that can guide you into the liminal and unseen and connect with a well ancestor. I also encourage you to ask about stories of your lineage. Listen to ancestral music. Speak the language or learn the language of your ancestry. Cook the foods as well. The palate, taking it on into your body, your field, and to taste the ancestral foods of your homeland is really lovely. If you're unable to access information about your lineage, this is vibrational connection, and that trumps everything, really, right? Like you're just cutting straight to source when you connect in that way and through the body. You also can research your lineages through etymology, photos, and family trees. So gather those photos, your names. The names are really potent. It's so fascinating what we can even find out by researching the etymology and the origins of our names, our given names, our family names, and also researching the places, our ancestral places and stories. Ask questions. Let the research guide your intuition. If you can't access information, then that's when you can use and really lean on your intuitive approaches and spiritual connection. Another way to connect is through place-based rituals. So this could look like a pilgrimage to visit an ancestral land, or creating altars in a specific place, offering prayers and gifts. This embodies reciprocity with the land and the place that essentially nourished and raised your family line. As I mentioned before, you can explore your haplogroups. So if you feel called, look at your mitochondrial DNA and what wisdom is carried in your maternal line. One of my favorite ways of connecting with ancestry and the spirit of my ancestors is through food. Now, my grandmothers were all about cooking and food and like passing that wisdom and lineage down. So eating ancestrally, connecting with your the foods of your ancestral lands, the light codes are still held within those foods, especially the plants. So nourish your mitochondria through those foods. Feed your light body as an act of remembrance. And lastly, you can explore your natal chart by looking at the planets, the asteroids, the patterns that you carry. They are mirrors of the ancestral terrain that you were birthed from. Explore your 4th house, your 10th house, your moon, your sun, the asteroids, the IC. Notice the placements, the conjunctions, the patterns, all that good stuff. And if you're new to astrology and you don't know where to start, seek out an astrologer, or you can also reach out. I have one-on-one sessions as well as a workshop that you can connect with your spiritual gifts through your natal chart. It's called Cosmic Gifts Clarity Blueprint. All links will be provided in the show notes below. This is sacred work, and it's necessary work. It's deeply personal and yet also collective and cosmic. And you don't have to walk it alone. Again, at the end of this month, I'm hosting that live ceremonial workshop, Between the Veils, Ancestral Alchemy for the Healer's Path, inside of our Bloom community, our sacred membership space for intuitive healers. So if that resonates with you, come join us before October 20th when the doors close. You can cancel the membership at any time. There's no contracts. So if it's calling you, I invite you into our virtual sanctuary for healers. I want to close with something that one of my favorite teachers, Maya Tiwari, and author of The Path of Practice, which is a beautiful book, especially for those who are interested in the Ayurvedic approach and Vedic perspective of things. But I wanted to close out by sharing a little excerpt of this book that speaks to this ancestral healing work and why it's so necessary. She says that the Vedic seers tell us that giving back to nature not only pleases our ancestors' spirits, but helps us develop inner consciousness. And as we awaken to our ancestral memories, we remember the meaning and purpose of our lives. The collective grief of the modern world is due to the loss of our ancestral memory. This loss is the most basic cause for the breakdown of Dharma, which means cosmic laws and life values besides life purpose in relation to our family, global community, and nature. She goes on to speak to the Kali Yuga and the necessary work of remembering where we come from, our ancestors, and to live in reciprocity, to bring back that cosmic order that is so necessary in this time. Remember that you are not alone. You are the dream of your ancestors, remembering itself. May your healing ripple forward and backward throughout all of time and throughout the unseen. I would love for you to leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Let me know what is resonating with you, what is waking up for you. Have you done your own ancestral healing work? I would love to hear about it and let me know. And if you feel called, come join us inside of Bloom. Until next time, lots of love and be well.